Welcome back to the channel. Today's topic, the truth about kids, social media, and dopamine. Now, I think this is a really important topic because we're starting to see the impacts of early social media and early phone use in children. And we're seeing the effects of their brain, their behavior, and all sorts of biological functions that are starting to come out in their research. And so many of the couples and the families and the clients I'm working with are starting to bring this topic in. So this video is going to give you an overview of dopamine and the reward system, how social media impacts it, the symptoms that kids might show that they are addicted to social media or they are in a dopamine depletion, and what to do about it. Just a reminder, if you haven't subscribed, please do below. We so appreciate your support in being able to offer this content on a weekly basis. So let's talk about dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is part of our internal reward system. And so if we get a reward, say we get a piece of cake, that is going to stimulate the exertion of dopamine in our brain. Not bad. Dopamine allows us to feel really connected to putting our will towards something to get something pleasurable. Now, the problem is we live in a world where we can get pleasure very, very easily. And as a result, so many people have really damaged their dopamine systems. So dopamine is a system that makes us seek something pleasurable. And as a result of giving that pleasurable feeling, we get dopamine. That dopamine enhances that pleasurable feeling. So the best example is alcohol or drugs. So say you get off of work, it's happy hour, you want to go get a couple drinks. So you get, say, 2 cocktails and you feel a lot of dopamine. Well, the next time you have 2 cocktails, say it's the next day, you're not going to get as much dopamine from those 2 cocktails. So you might have to have 3 cocktails to get just that a little bit of dopamine you had on the day before. And then the next day, well, you're probably going to have 6 cocktails to get that dopamine. Porn, all sorts of things. Like anything that is really easy for us to get pleasure from is going to have a diminishing return. And so what they found, like the new research shows that if you want to overcome the sense of dopamine deficit that we're all facing, you want to feel a sense of reward through doing something hard instead of easy. And so think about the amount of energy and effort it takes to climbing a mountain, but then you get the dopamine that does not have diminished returns. And so this is just an overview of how the dopamine reward system works. And as adults, we have to really keep ourselves in balance because our phone is giving us little hits of dopamine all the time. And so we're really having to be aware how this deficit is playing into our behavior and where we're putting our energy. But now you think about kids. Kids have their system is way weaker. It's not so refined. And so if they're learning to get dopamine early on through a pleasurable activity, say it's scrolling, it's social media, it's playing video games, something technology based, like too many hours on the screen, then they're getting that dopamine hit over and over and over in a really young system. And so the impacts are even further reaching because just like an adult who's going to happy hour and reaching for a drink 4 days in a row, they're not going to get near as the amount of dopamine on Sunday that they got on Thursday. The kid is teaching their system what amount of dopamine they really need in their body long term. Now really think about that. The effects are devastating. So kids, when they have screen times or video games or social media early on, their brain, their neurotransmitters are refining how much dopamine the body is actually creating. And so that's the problem, that kids left unto their own devices are going to start reaching for the things that are giving their quick hit of dopamine. And they really need to be guided towards getting that other side of dopamine where it's not diminishing returns. So some of the symptoms you might see in kids, it's when they wake up and they're searching for social media, a screen, technology of any sort, or video games right off the bat. So usually kids wake up and they're primed towards wanting to connect with a human immediately, maybe an animal immediately. They want to go outside. And so if you see a child 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, really until their teen years, where they wake up and they don't want to connect, they want to stay in their room, they want to watch TV, they want to be on their phone, they don't want to go outside, then this is part of a really clear signal that they might be addicted. Another thing that happens is their circadian rhythm gets all messed up because they're on screens. So a lot of kids in the summer, if their parents are working, they're on screens too much. Their dopamine system's off, their circadian rhythm is off. So their sleep patterns are going to be all off. They might go to sleep later and later and later, waking up later and later and later. Another symptom that a kid might be going through an addiction is that if they don't have technology in their hand, they're going to feel bored, that they're going to get so much quote unquote creativity from the phone that if they are just outside, they're going to feel not stimulated enough. So if a child's been on technology for too long and they have a dopamine deficit, there's usually a crash where they're more lethargic, they're bored, they're restless, and they're agitated. So again, if a child is exhibiting any of these symptoms, it might show there's too much use with technology. So attention span is another area that's really, really impacted by the kids' dopamine response and addiction to screens, technology, or social media. And so if you see sleep disturbances, restlessness, inability to just focus or to sit, not able or open to being creative without technology, they don't want to go outside, they don't want to connect with as many people or you, then it is a sign that their dopamine system has been influenced. And so much technology, gaming, and social media technology companies, they've actually hired neuroscientists to say the exact amount of time someone needs before they hit a button and they get the response. So they know what they're doing. They're really hijacking the dopamine system. And I think this is why it's really important to get this message out there. So if you see this happening to any children you know, and you have the authority and agency to help with that child, you have to cut down screen time. And what I would say, if you reorient the family, so you're focused on connecting together and being outside as much as you can. So there's something in our soul that feels at home with nature. And when we've been hijacked, we're bored with nature and we want technology instead. And so if you just prioritize being outside with your family, where all of you are without screens and technology, and you do this long enough, and a kid is young enough, it can really start to rebuild that system. And like I said at the beginning, if you're reaching for pleasure to get dopamine, then it's going to have diminishing returns. But if you're reaching for pain or challenge to get dopamine, then it gives you even more dopamine. And so that's a way that you can change and challenge that hijacking of the dopamine system. So exercise with your children, go do things outside, activities, things that get the heart rate up, that make a child feel like they're pushing against something. And this is going to help them rebuild that connection to dopamine. It's going to allow the brain to exert more dopamine because they're reaching for something challenging and painful that is pushing them rather than pleasure. And then when they get rebalanced, so some kids are so addicted that it takes months and months to get rebalanced. And this is just a long-term prioritization and changing of the family to be able to say, we're connecting together, we're connecting to nature, we're slowing down, we're getting creative, let's get back in touch with our imagination. And then when they get rebalanced, you introduce screens with a very, very low screen time. So set the parental controls, determine how many minutes per day is healthy. I think for kids up to 7, I think less than an hour for sure. And the final point is really checking in on how often are you on your own phone? My husband and I are quite aware of all the issues with dopamine for adults and kids. And I still know unchecked, if we're reaching for it more and more and more, then we need to have a conversation and we need to challenge ourselves to put the phones away, to put technology away. So if kids are doing it a lot, it's an indicator that the parent is doing it a lot. And you have to ask yourself, how often am I on my phone? If my kid is imitating my behavior with the phone, are they going to have a healthy or an unhealthy relationship with technology? And so I think this is just a message we all have to consider. It's not about banning technology. I think that's a really extreme response. Maybe in some cases it's the right way to go, but it's about letting your kid learn how to work with this stimulus. So they're not avoiding it completely to where if they get it back again, they're going to have to rebuild their own discipline with it. It's about being able to merge technology in a healthy way. And really, we just need to know what we're up against. That social media, gaming companies, and big tech industries unfortunately know what they need to do in order to hijack our attention. And so it's just about understanding what we're up against. It's about setting a foundation or a pattern that doesn't allow us to get so off of our centered and so addicted to it. And it's about knowing if we as adults can get addicted, then the capacity and the likelihood of a child getting addicted is even more so. And so if you're a parent, educator, teacher, caretaker watching this, I think it's up to us to really guide our children and make sure we're not getting them into this dopamine deficit, because it's horrible what it's creating. It can be undone, but with the tools and the knowledge, you can have such an impact on making sure it doesn't happen to you or the people you love. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.